Next up, we've got KTM, another story from Cycle World, and it says that they're moving more production to China. I can't quite figure out from this article if they're moving all production to China or part of their production to China, but it says they're cutting 300 jobs at their Austria plant and moving, well, everything below the 400s, as I said earlier, is already built by Bajaj out in India. But stuff above that, I think they're basically strengthening this collaboration, I was going to say, with CF Moto to build even more of their bikes out there, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? I mean, firstly, they've been doing that anyway with their 790 Duke and 790 Adventure. I don't know if you've seen those up close yet.
Yeah, I will have done. Were they at Motorcycle Life?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We checked them out there, actually. Very good point. And looking at the stand there, you wouldn't immediately walk up to one and be like, that one's built in China.
No.
They just look exactly the same in terms of fit.
And they had them side by side with the 890s and things and the rest of their range.
Exactly.
You couldn't really tell there was a difference. But then it's the same componentry. So I think for me it more comes down to how it's constructed. But if they can be on top of it, and obviously they've trialed it with the 790, so if they're going to move more bikes over there, then surely that just means that the results they're getting so far have been to their liking.
Yes. And I will say, having spent a couple of weeks with those bikes, the 790s, I didn't have any reliability issues. You wouldn't expect anything, of course, but I can't speak for the longer term, but one would assume the build quality is pretty much as good as what you'll find from their Austrian plants, because it'll be the same processes and same quality control. But I guess it's still got some questions for the KTM buyer.
Yeah.
Number one, are people happy for them to keep their price the same, but move their production to somewhere else where it's probably going to cost them less? So they're just growing their margins and not really passing any savings on to the customer. How would you feel about that? Let's say you bought a 20 grand, top of the range, nearly 20 grand anyway, Super Duke with all the trimmings, electronic suspension, the Evo version.
Yeah.
A couple of years back, 2-3 years back, PCP'd it maybe, loved it, and thought I'm just going to get the new 1390 version. Maybe it costs about the same. So you just chop your old one in at the dealer, take PCP on the new version, but you know that it's being produced somewhere that's cheaper and you're paying the same amount. Like, do you feel bugged by that, or is it just a case of paying what you're willing to pay? I mean, that's ultimately how you price things.
Well, first of all, you've locked me into PCP. I see what you've done there. Well done. Good. Well played.
I should be in sales.
To say exactly it's the same as the dealership, Will. So now I'm locked into the system, and every 3 years I have to trade it in and get something new. I never really own it. But yeah, it would make me question whether I wanted to go with a different bike, I think, or a different brand that wasn't doing that. And there is no reason necessarily for that. It would just be a gut feeling of mine where I just kind of want to go, like you say, right, they're cheaping out a little bit. And if another brand isn't doing that, then they wouldn't feel maybe quite as cheap. Maybe they feel a bit more premium to me, just as a consumer. I think it's a little bit of a misassumption on that one, but that's probably where I'd go.
But we just said the 790s are indistinguishable.
Yeah, but if you're, like you say, if it entered my mind that yes, they're actually just doing it to increase their margins, and I understand it's a business, it is what it is, but I think it would be enough to at least make me look at another manufacturer that wasn't doing that.
Because you want something with authenticity, or
a little bit. I also feel bad for the 300 employees in Austria that are just axing. That sucks.
Yeah, I suppose so. But ultimately, the argument is normally we either cut that stuff and move it to China, or there are no jobs.
I get it, but then I completely get it. But then I was surprised with how passionate they are about their machines to a Ducati standard when I went on a trip with some of the guys from KTM, and my assumption erroneously was that they were a little bit more clinical and that they didn't really have the same sort of passion for it, that it was just a logical job that just make them well. But no, they really are in Austria very passionate about the brand, the same way that Italians are about Ducati.
So they're giving it the big ones rather on the brand, like with this really performance-based, like proud Austrian company, and then you feel like there's a disconnect with what they're actually doing in terms of production. And
also, I just wonder what Austrians feel about that. If there are any listening, then let us know.
Shout out to our Austrian fan base.
Yeah. One Austrian
Let us
listener.
know in the comments what you think. Obviously, the podcast is available on like all audio podcast players, but there is the YouTube version with the video. So please do leave comments as to what you think about this and whether it would put you off. Personally, I don't know, to be honest. It seems like the Triumph 400s, for example, that's one of their first forays into building in India. And it sounds like we haven't got hold of one yet. We'll get one soon. But the initial reviews from the launch are pretty good, that they've come up with something really tempting in terms of price. And that's genuinely good fun to ride. But I think there's a difference between this approach of the smaller bikes being built elsewhere and maybe keeping your premium big bikes built in those more expensive locations, than there is maybe licensing out more and more your bikes to be produced by someone else on your behalf.